Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Opinion Machine, the show where we talk about all things gaming. My name is Killjoy, and today I want to talk about a PC game called War Tales. Now, this game's been out, I think, a couple of months, and it's made by my old friends Shiro Games, who did the June Spice Wars games and did Northgard. And if you know that I have a few issues with some of their things, but despite that, they're a fairly competent developer. I'm just very picky about my games, clearly. But War Tales, what is War Tales? It is a game that is split into two halves, basically. You have the overworld adventuring half, and then you have the combat. There's a bit more to it than that, but basically the game's in two phases. Those are the two phases. It is essentially a turn-based strategy game in combat, and a free-roaming, sort of top-down view game while in the overworld. And the premise of the game is that you are this warband. You set up at the beginning of the story, kind of your background, and you pick a county to start in, and you're kind of roaming as mercenaries, I guess, and essentially going from county to county, helping out with all their troubles. The game is set very much like in medieval England, or just sort of medieval times. Most of the weapons are like maces and swords, bows, things stuck on the end of a club. Stuff like that. There's no magic per se. It's primarily you and just, what you kind of, for the most part, kind of expect for that kind of time period. Now, let's start with the overworld side of things. So this game, I should probably say you can play this game in co-op. I have primarily played it in co-op, and some of my issues, which we'll get to, may come from the fact that I've been playing it in co-op. But anyway, the overworld has you roaming around, so whichever characters you have assigned kind of shows that visibly. If you've got a pony that carries your stuff, then it will show you that on the world map. There are a lot of little details in this game that are kind of cool. Anyway, on the overworld, on the world map, as you're walking around, you can encounter traders, you can encounter bandits, you can encounter patrols, which is essentially the police, because you can get wanted in this game, and they will come after you. You can find mines, you can find towns, stables, all kinds like chapels, all kinds of different places that will have different people there that might have quests for you. They might be part of the county quests, because each county has a bunch of quests that you can do to try and help the county out, plus other ones. And there's quite a lot to do. It's fairly interesting. And you go around from place to place, and you basically get those sort of quests. The other thing with this game is it's also very survival heavy. So what that means is that the bigger your warband gets, that means that's more people to pay to stay with you, that's more people to feed. So you have to think about those things, and those are two very the food side of it is very fleshed out in the game. You can collect things like fish, wheat, meats. You might fight some wolves and get meats from them. The game is a lot to it in terms of mechanics that are going on. And what you do essentially is that food and money are your two main things, and happiness. So it's those three, really, not two. Everyone's happy. No, nothing bad's going to happen. If you run out of food or you can't pay them, they're going to get unhappy. They're going to leave. Food becomes a problem when you have a much bigger party, so does payment. But the good thing with payment is that you can get quests very easily, and you can get like 100 gold here, or crones as it is. Straightforward. But the food thing, I can see, like, you have to, it's a balance. The whole game is a balancing act of, like, making sure people don't die, don't leave, people they're happy, they're fed, and on lower difficulties it's not too much to worry about. It's only when you start to get to more like a 15-man party and upwards when you're like, okay, maybe this is like food and stuff's becoming a bit of a problem. But you can usually find, if there are ways to get things. Which brings on to the camp, I guess, to some degree. Is so while you're roaming the world, you have a fatigue bar. You can go and rest up and pay to rest up in an inn. You can be in town and camp, but you can be out in the wilderness and camp as well. And what camp essentially allows you to do is to feed your troops, pay your troops, and also allow you to set up unique buildings which will allow your characters you can assign them to. So you might want somebody assigned as a tinkerer, for example, and what that allows you to do is build things for your camp. A better cooking pot, or a cooking pot in general, so you can make more than just the basic meals. You can get a tent that allows them to increase I think it's happiness, or no, it's not happiness, it's valor points, which is a mechanic for in combat. You can have somebody on a meat drying rack, so that any carcasses you find in the world you can turn into meat. You can become very self-efficient and sustainable, and it can really help when you get into dilemmas of like, I'm really struggling for certain food items. All of this comes at a cost that you need to find, you know, ingredients, you need to find raw materials, you need to find all kinds of different things to create stuff. You wanna make rope, you better find some hemp. You wanna build things at the camp, well, you better have wood and stone and iron ore and things like that. So the game, there's a lot to juggle, and I think it is a little bit overwhelming, actually, just how much there is in this game, because there's a lot of mechanics. But for the most part, they're fairly straightforward, and it works. You know, it's a cool idea. The UI is a bit blank, like it's not a very interesting UI, but it's passable. It does the job. It does what you need it to do. So that side of things is interesting. On the other side of this game, you have the combat, and the combat is I love turn-based combat. Now, let's talk about the good stuff. So each character can level up. You can have somebody who's a ranger or an archer or a swordsman, and you can give them slightly different paths and slightly different upgrades, which is kind of fun. And those different upgrades allow them to sort of specialize. Some skills aren't made equally, and some skills are definitely better than others, but there is choice there, and that's cool. You can also level up their like strength and all that sort of stuff, and depending on the type of character they are, strength might be their damage. You might want them to carry more. You might have dex, which is good for assassins, things like that. So there's that. And each character you have, so there's an archer class, a swordsman class, a brute class, a ranger class, and I forget, I'm blanking on the others, the spearman class. And each one is very unique in the fact that that class they can only use that weapon. So you can't give a swordsman a club or a two-handed weapon or anything. Like, you can give them a two-handed sword or a sword, but you can't give them anything else, which is a really interesting choice in this game. And that leads to, you know, you wanting to mix up your party, have different people, have different weapons. You know, they can wear armor. They just put an update in. They can have helmets now. So all in all, like, there's a lot of customization for your characters. You can capture animals in the wild. You can capture prisoners and use them in combat as well if you want to use cannon fodder or just get bears. And for the most part, the combat is pretty good. The turn-based stuff, for the most part, works. You move people around. They have different movements. Things like that. You can have back attacks. You engage with the enemy. So if you're engaged with somebody with an enemy, someone else can come along and stab them in the back. There's a lot of things about this game that are actually good. And this is where it gets weird, because despite everything, this game is still janky as all hell. And I think part of this comes down to me playing this co-op. So I've been playing this with 2 other people. I'm playing with my brother and I've been playing with Don Hayes. And we've encountered some crazy things. Like, for example, like I might be walking on the map and somebody else is like lagging behind me and like hopping around. You see that the patrols where like one guy's got the symbol above his head and the rest of the patrol is like coming towards him. Like, it's just a lot of jank in this game, and it's really kind of frustrating, because what I'm starting to realize is that this game has a lot of really good ideas and it's an interesting game, but it almost needed maybe a little bit more time, or it needed a slightly bigger budget, because there are things here that you can tell that are very low budget. For example, the voice acting in this game is fucking awful. And every character has like one line. So, not every character, main quest givers do have some lines. But yes, you can find characters and it's literally like, they've been told to read the lines like, la 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 la. Like, it doesn't have any emotion to it. And you know, that is kind of funny. But it is also really annoying when you go back and visit certain characters and they still say the same line. So that side of things, the voice lines aren't great. In the first area, most of them are Welsh, which is kind of fun. But yeah, like, there's just that sort of thing. It's where you start to see the cracks with this game when you start to go looking past the initial offerings. Like I said, the UI in this game, and it is passable for the most part. But it's also really bland. It has no flavour to it at all. And it looks like it's just like, oh, we just use the default, whatever it was in that engine. You do have cool things like you get knowledge points that allow you to learn new recipes and like new skills and stuff. Really awesome. You get path points that allow you to get extra skills on top of that. Awesome. And they're not too bad, but if you look at this game, you can tell that this UI is ripped out of like Northgard and Dune. It's very, very similar along the top bar, all that sort of stuff. It's like they kind of figured out what works for them, and they're reusing elements of that. And that would be fine if it was a bit more like themed in this game, because it is bland as all hell. And even like the combat and some of the graphics, I'm not a graphics person. I'm not one of these people that thinks, you know, graphics have to are the be all and end all. But this game has some, I don't know, everything's just a little bit generic. And I get there's a semi bit of realism going on, you know, being like sort of medievalish time and that sort of stuff, but it just feels it's such a shame, because I think this game is very fun and has caused some hilarity. Like, for example, in co-op, that you use free reign. This is a good thing and a bad thing. In co-op, you if you can click faster than somebody else, you can make the decisions. So, for example, we came across a guy that was a cannibal, and he'd eaten his parents, and I was like, nah, let him live. It turns out, I just decided that that's who we're going to defend, and, you know, play the chaos way, essentially. And, you know, it was a lot of fun, but basically, I'm the one basically making that decision there and then. And I think you have to understand that going in, because this game, from what I can tell, this game works better as a single-player game in terms of running better, a lot smoother. The netcode seems like there might be an issue. But in multiplayer, like, if you're being chased by some guys and somebody's like, I want to pick up this rock, and you run off, they kind of get locked. I think they've adjusted it slightly so you move now. But there's a lot of things in this game that you have to be willing to put up with. And that's partly the joy of playing co-op. But it's also partly the frustration. It doesn't swing either way. It's sort of in the middle of those two, where there are times when it works and it'll be funny, and there are other times when it'll just be like, what the hell's going on? The absolute biggest issue in this game is you get stuck on invisible things on the overworld all the time. And despite the fact this game's had a couple of patches, small patches, but had a couple, still haven't fixed it. I'm still getting stuck on God knows what. I'm just like, walk up the bloody hill. Like, this is the biggest problem with this game. It's a frustrating experience in some elements, and it shouldn't be, because there's cool things like you've got tomb exploring. We'll get to that in a minute, but you can do that. You've got the ability to make one of your guys essentially a musician. They can play a lute. You get a little mini game. All the different jobs have mini games to them. You can be a woodcutter and a miner and a fisherman and a scholar, and they're all useful. The camp stuff's really cool. The path points and the knowledge points are really cool. You can be a blacksmith as well. There's a lot of stuff in this game. There's really good ideas. It's just not executed as well as I would like it to be, and I do think that even though it's better now, at the time of recording, this is a couple months down the line from it being released, or at least I think it's 2 months, they've patched it and there are things that are better. But for example, when you go into a woods, you go invisible, and they've recently updated it and made it more obvious that you can ambush people. Why that wasn't there from the start, I don't know. They kind of assumed people were like, oh, if you're in the woods, you can ambush, blah, 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 blah. Now you've actually got a symbol above your head, which makes it much more obvious to be like, you can now ambush people. It's just a lot of little stuff like that where it's like, I know certain things get overlooked in games. It's just maybe the game, I get they had deadlines probably to meet, and they probably felt it was polished enough to put out. But it is frustrating, because in about a year's time, or even in 6 months, looking at their roadmap, they're looking at adding, DLC and extra content, but a lot of updates. And I know that in that time, this game will be significantly better, but it isn't now. Like, there are still problems with it. If the netcode is the thing causing most of the problems with the game, then it's, there's nothing I can do about it until they update the netcode. It's just frustrating how the game is very much like that right now, where it's in this state of like, there's great ideas, this is kind of fun, and then at other points it's like, this is frustrating. Like, another good thing, the music's really good in the game. The music's really fun and enjoyable, apart from there's like maybe one track I don't like. So there's like so many good bits about it, but it's not, I don't know, it's at a point now where I'm like, it's not quite where I want it to be. And it's unfortunate, because hopefully in the footage you can see for this, that you'll see like, oh, this is fun. This looks like a good game. And it is a good game. I'm not going to say that it isn't. It's just, right now, it's a good game. It's not a great game. It could be a great game, but that is for you to decide, looking at it and all that stuff. There's probably some other bits and bobs I've missed out in this, but these are the main points I wanted to get across. Like, I want to state that this is a fun game. There are cool things here, right? I think the start of the game and the idea of it, it's just like, it's almost just a little bit generic for my taste, this game. There are other games that do the combat a little bit better, despite the combat being decent. There's just one too many niggles in this right now. One too many issues. Minor issues maybe, but enough to just be like putting me off of it. And I hope that I can revisit this in 6 months' time and see that a lot of that stuff has been improved. That's the plan anyway. So yeah, there you go. There's my thoughts on War Tales. It's a good game. marred down by some issues that the game has, but will hopefully be fixed. But I'll come back in 6 months or a year and we'll see where it's at that point. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this video. As always, if you like the video, hit like. If you want to see more like this, hit subscribe. Links for Facebook and Twitter will be down below in the description as always. And until next video, I will see you then.